South Korea's central bank keeps its key rate steady at 3.5% for the 8th session in a row as it keeps close tabs on higher inflation. Amid heightened security tensions, dozens of countries at the United Nations raised their voices against Russia using North Korean weapons in Ukraine. The U.S. and the U.K. warned of military action against Yemen's Houthi rebels for their largest attack in the Red Sea, fueling concerns over an escalation of the crisis. It's January 11th, 2024. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with the latest key rate decision by the South Korean Central Bank. Monetary policymakers have decided to hold the rate steady at 3.5% for the 8th session in a row. And the BOK looks cautious when it comes to rate cuts. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
The Bank of Korea's monetary policy stance of freezing the key interest rate continued into the new year. Following the first Monetary Policy Committee meeting of 2024, the central bank on Thursday announced that it will keep the rate unchanged at 3.5%.
Although there's a continued slowdown in the inflation rate, it still remains at a high level, and there's significant uncertainty in the outlook. Therefore, we have decided to keep a tightened monetary policy and continue to assess the policy situation both domestically and externally.
This is the 8th consecutive time that the BOK has decided to freeze the rate. The base rate was raised to 3.5% in January of last year and has remained at that level since February, following 10 consecutive rate hikes to tackle inflation. Analysts mention concerns about high interest rates due to risks in real estate project financing as factors that have deterred the BOK from further rate hikes. Higher interest rates and increasing construction costs have led to project delays, creating challenges for firms to repay their project financing loans. Taeyong Engineering and Construction, the 16th largest of those firms in Korea in terms of construction capacity, applied for a debt restructuring program late last month due to a liquidity shortfall as the company struggles to repay real estate project financing loans. Cutting rates immediately would be difficult. Rising household loans up for the 9th straight month in December are a factor to consider before cutting the rate. As explained during the press conference, the BOK's cautious approach to rate cuts is driven by concerns about potentially reigniting expectations of inflation and stimulating real estate price rises. As the U.S. Federal Reserve indicated rate cuts in 2024, the market's focus is now on the timing of rate cuts from the Fed and the BOK.
Due to still high inflation in the U.S. and the lingering global economic uncertainty, it's expected that the Fed's rate cuts may not be discussed until the latter half of this year. The cut could be smaller than anticipated, and the timing depends on various factors, including the job market in the U.S.
The BOK governor said that future decisions on the interest rate will depend on the Fed's monetary policy, global oil prices, and domestic inflation, adding that rate cuts in the next 6 months are unlikely. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports are off to a good start this year thanks to rise in semiconductors and shipments to China. According to the Korea Customs Service on Thursday, the value of outbound shipments amounted to around $15 billion in the first 10 days of January. This is up 11.2% compared to the same period last year. The increase was led by exports of semiconductors, which were up by more than 25%, and petroleum products up by around 20%. By country, outbound shipments to China rose more than 10%, recording a first on-year increase in 20 months. Small business owners and others whose credit scores have dropped due to overdue payments during the COVID-19 pandemic, but who have since paid back all they owe, will have their negative credit history erased from the record. This is according to the ruling People Power Party's chief policymaker Yoo Hee-dong at a meeting between the party, the government, and finance industry leaders. They will support credit recovery procedures for as many as 2.9 million people with overdue history of less than 20 million Korean won, or around $15,000 beginning in 2021. This is expected before the upcoming Lunar New Year. The U.S. securities regulator has approved Bitcoin to be included in exchange-traded funds, allowing it into mainstream finance. Trading could begin as early as tomorrow local time. Moon Hae-ryun explains what this means for investors and the crypto industry.
On Wednesday, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission approved the first U.S.-listed exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, to track Bitcoin. According to a notice on its website, the 11 companies that were approved to launch Bitcoin ETFs include BlackRock, ARK Investments, and Fidelity, and some are expected to begin trading as early as Thursday. The crypto industry has been beset by 2 years of fluctuating prices and a slew of scandals, but this move comes as a game-changer for Bitcoin, the world's most popular cryptocurrency. Previously, investors had to set up crypto wallets and accounts with crypto exchanges, in short, directly hold it to buy and sell Bitcoin.
There will be companies which buy and sell Bitcoins based on their strategy, and they will have their own different little profiles and probably different profit rates as well. So what you're buying is part of that.
But now they will have exposure to prices and such without the complication and risks of owning it directly, as crypto wallets are often prone to hacking. The SEC's announcement came with several protective measures for investors, such as requiring sponsors to provide full, fair, and truthful disclosure about Bitcoin products and listing them on registered national securities exchanges designed to prevent fraud and manipulation. The agency came to such a decision after a decade of rejecting Bitcoin ETFs, as last year a U.S. federal appeals court ruled that the agency needed to rethink its rejection of an ETF application from Grayscale Investments. Experts are hopeful that their concerns regarding the volatility of the cryptocurrency for investors will lessen as it settles into the financial mainstream with this latest decision.
It should bring in billions of more dollars into the Bitcoin market, growing the market considerably, and hopefully if there are more buyers and sellers, we won't see the extreme volatility of Bitcoins that we have seen before.
However, SEC's chair, Gary Gensler, remains a fierce skeptic of the crypto industry and clarified that this announcement did not in any way approve or endorse Bitcoin. He also warned that investors should continue to be cautious about the myriad risks that come with cryptocurrencies. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
One of the world's most influential annual tech events kicked off in Las Vegas on Tuesday local time, as we have been reporting. The Consumer Electronics Show 2024 is offering a glimpse into consumer technology trends. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin is here in the studio with this topic. Hi, Soo-jin.
Thank you for having me.
So what are the major takeaways this year?
So what's important is that CES in 2024 has come back in full force, and it's expected to draw the largest crowd seen since the COVID-19 pandemic. South Korea has the third most companies participating this year. And to no surprise, after a year of artificial intelligence dominating headlines, AI took center stage at this year's CES. Let's take a listen.
With generative AI in the last year since it's come about, there's a lot of very rapid developments, companies going into new areas. It's a fundamentally game-setting, changing technology.
In line with this key theme, companies showcased various AI-integrated products. One such product that Samsung revealed at the event was a revamped robot companion, Bali. Bali can move around the house by itself and control various smart home devices. And the new and improved Bali also has built-in projectors that can stream phone calls and cooking videos on the walls of people's homes. And another key theme was mobility, or more specifically, air mobility, as flying cars stole the show. Supernal, Hyundai Motors' advanced air mobility company, unveiled a prototype for its latest electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle that is expected to be up and running by 2028. And its battery capacity allows it to travel within cities, and it only makes as much noise as a dishwasher.
Fascinating, Soo-jin. So we've talked about big names companies, but what about South Korean startups? How are they faring this year?
So in short, they're actually doing better than ever. This year, record number of South Korean startups were awarded innovation awards. We talked to some local startups that were recognized, and they also all emphasized the importance of advanced technologies. Here's what one of them said.
We were able to win innovation awards in both the drones and unmanned systems and the human security for all categories because the marine salvage and recovery market is becoming increasingly influenced by the robotics market.
Shekel is a startup that develops environmental solutions, and its aquatic cleaning drone uses a rotor to direct water inside the device, where it separates the pollutants with mesh filters. It then discharges the purified water back into the ocean. Another startup that won an innovation award is The Little Cat, a digital pet healthcare company. It took home the accolade for its device that measures body composition in cats. The app shows various information such as the weight, BMI, fat and protein level, and recommends cat food based on this data. And for these startups, CES is important because it opens the door to more business opportunities. Let's take a listen.
We've already had buyers and distributors from all over the world contact us thanks to CES.
Right, Sujin, and now let's focus on Chinese companies. Can you tell us what they and U.S. companies brought to CES this year?
Well, first of all, it's quite a return in the sense that we're almost back at pre-pandemic levels. The number of participating Chinese companies has more than doubled from the previous year. Participation of Chinese companies at CES had dwindled over the past few years as COVID-19 lockdowns made it difficult for them to travel abroad, and geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and China were also a hindrance. But they're back as they target global markets amid a sluggish economy. Chinese tech company TCL unveiled Nextpaper 14 Pro, a giant tablet that doubles as an e-reader by offering 3 types of viewing modes: standard, color paper, and ink paper. U.S. companies, too, were showing off their latest tech, and retail giant Walmart is one company that has embraced AI technology. Walmart showcased a generative AI-powered search tool that allows shoppers to ask for shopping advice for specific situations, as well as plans to expand drone delivery services where items are delivered in 30 minutes or less. And this year's CES is thus not only noteworthy for recovering almost to its pre-pandemic glory days, but also for all the innovative global companies there. Here's what one attendee said.
The energy is so, full and excitement, and I think everybody's just wondering, like, what are we going to discover? What's new? What's exciting? And in particular, for me, it's what do global companies bring?
While not a lot of time is left until CES 2024 comes to a close, there's no doubt that it's once again provide a close look into the future of consumer technology.
All right, thank you for your report today, Sujin.
It was my pleasure.
At the latest UN Security Council meeting, South Korea, the U.S., along with other countries, strongly condemned North Korea-Russia arms transfers. This came just a day after some 40 countries released a statement condemning Russia using North Korean ballistic missiles in Ukraine. Our Kim Jong-sil tells us more.
The U.S. during a UN Security Council meeting on Wednesday strongly condemned the arms exports from North Korea to Russia.
It's abhorrent that a permanent member of the UN Security Council is flagrantly violating Council resolutions to attack another UN member state.
South Korea's ambassador to the UN also condemned the North, saying that the missile launches provide valuable technical and missile insights to Pyongyang.
By exporting missiles to Russia, the DPRK used Ukraine as a test site of its nuclear-capable missiles.
Russia, on the other hand, denied the allegations.
The US seems to be spreading information that is wrong without going through the trouble of checking this beforehand.
The meeting came a day after foreign ministers from around 40 countries released a joint statement on DPRK Russia ballistic missile transfers on Tuesday, condemning in, quote, the strongest possible terms the Pyongyang-Moscow arms transfers and Russia's use of North Korean ballistic missiles in Ukraine. The international condemnation came amid rising tensions on the Korean peninsula, with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un earlier in the week calling South Korea the North's main enemy, adding that he would, quote, wipe out South Korea if it attempts to use force. The South Korean government said Kim's words were an outdated tactic and a play on words. Experts said Kim may have tactical reasons for his strong remarks, especially with the younger generation showing a growing interest in South Korean culture, and he may want to create internal cohesion by escalating animosity. South Korean Defense Minister Shin Won-sik, in an interview with Yonhap News Agency, said there's a possibility North Korea will export its close-range tactical guided missile to Russia. The minister also added that Pyongyang may test-fire its intermediate-range ballistic missile within the month. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
South Korea's top court has once again ruled in favor of a Korean victim of wartime forced labor, ordering a Japanese company to pay a significant amount of compensation. Similar rulings were made in separate cases last month. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pei-Eun-ji explains.
Mr. Kim was taken from his home in Korea to Japan in March 1943 and was forced to work in a mill for Nippon Steel without being paid until he was able to return home in 1946 after Korea gained independence from Japan. He died in 2012, and the family of the late victim filed a suit against the Japanese company in 2015. On Thursday, South Korea's Supreme Court upheld the appellate court's decision, ordering Nippon Steel to pay 100 million Korean won, or about $76,000 in compensation to Mr. Kim's wife and their 2 children. The top court made similar rulings in separate cases in December, ordering Nippon Steel and other Japanese companies, such as Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, to pay as much as 150 million Korean won, or about $111,000 to each victim. But the Japanese companies are likely to continue refusing to pay, and the Korean government is expected to compensate the victims instead, using funds procured through a public foundation. Such a plan was announced earlier this year to improve relations with Japan.
Since last March, following the announcement of our government's plan to resolve the forced labor issue, we have been paying the delayed compensation interest to the plaintiffs through the Foundation for Victims of Forced Mobilization by Imperial Japan. There's no change in our policy to continue making such payments in accordance with ongoing court decisions.
Japanese companies have yet to pay the previously ordered compensation, claiming the statute of limitations has expired. But last month, the top court clarified that this would not be allowed. Pei-Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Turning to the crisis in the Red Sea, the U.S. and the U.K. have warned of military action against Yemen's Houthi rebels for their largest attack in the sea. Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
Both the United States and the United Kingdom said Wednesday that they could take military action against Yemen's Houthi rebels after they repelled the group's largest attack yet on the Red Sea. Responding to the attacks, carrier-based jets and warships on Tuesday night shot down 21 drones and missiles launched by Houthis. The Houthis say they targeted a U.S. ship that they said was providing support to Israel, as they repeatedly claimed that any merchant vessels linked to Israel would be attacked in protest against Israeli offensives in Gaza. The latest Houthi attack was the 26th such attack on commercial shipping in the Red Sea since November 19th. During his trip to the Middle East, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Wednesday that there will be consequences for continued Houthi attacks in the Red Sea.
Again, all I can tell you is that, as we made clear, and many other countries made clear, there'll be consequences for the Houthis' actions. We've also repeatedly tried to make clear to Iran, as other countries have as well, that the support that they're providing to the Houthis, including for these actions, needs to stop.
Meanwhile, Blinken on Wednesday met Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in the Israeli-occupied West Bank following meetings with Israeli leaders. During the meeting, the two discussed post-war plans for Gaza, including steps towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. The U.S. envoy also discussed efforts to minimize civilian harm in the Gaza Strip and increase the delivery of aid inside the war-torn region, expressing support for a Palestinian state and encouraging administrative reforms of the PA. President Abbas told Blinken that no Palestinians should be displaced from Gaza or the West Bank. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's shopping and tourism festival, the Korea Grand Sale, kicked off today with the aim of attracting 20 million foreign tourists to the country this year. The host of the event, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, says it'll run for 50 days until the end of February. More than 1,600 firms will be offering discounts and opportunities to experience Korean culture. That's the greatest number of companies to take part in this annual event since it first started in 2011. Tourists can save up to 91% on plane tickets and up to 80% on accommodation. Information on how to make the most of the wide array of benefits can be found on koreagrandsale.co.kr. Here in Seoul, an annual award ceremony has taken place to applaud the efforts of those who sought to raise Korea's image overseas. Our Ian Hee covers their contributions.
The Korea Image Awards ceremony took place in Seoul on Wednesday. At the annual event, the Korea Image Communication Institute honors both domestic and international figures and organizations that have notably contributed to enhancing South Korea's global reputation. The Korea Image Stepping Stone Award was awarded to Genesis, Hyundai Motor Group's premium car brand, for promoting Korea's global image and prestige through its special brand experience. Last September, Genesis celebrated a significant milestone, having sold its 1 millionth car 7 years and 10 months after the brand's launch.
Providing the most comfortable and safe form of transportation in the world is always our priority, so we always try our best to bring new technologies and perfect quality.
World-renowned Swiss architect Mario Botta was presented with the Korea Image Stepping Stone Bridge Award in recognition of his contribution to introducing Korea to the world by designing award-winning landmarks including the Liu Museum of Art and the Gangnam Gyobo Tower, both located in Seoul. Another honoree was the globally acclaimed opera tenor Im Hyung-ju, who received the Korea Image Capstone Award for his achievements in the music industry, which has led him to be called the pioneer of Asian opera. Since his debut in 1998, he has set a record for having 19 out of his 20 solo albums reach #1 on Korea's classical album sales chart within a week of release, including his most recent album released in November 2023.
While I still have much room for improvement, I've been very lucky to receive many awards, but this award, named a capstone, is especially an honor for me.
The next winner was Laure Mafo, who moved to Korea from France as she fell in love with pansori, Korea's traditional musical storytelling. She received the Korea Image Flower Stone Award for promoting pansori not only in Korea and France, but also to the world. Each year, opinion leaders from a variety of countries gather at the ceremony with the ultimate aim of strengthening cultural bonds and promoting vibrant exchanges within our global community. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
There is no need to worry too much about the cold, but the air quality is still not great. Low air quality continued during the day today, and ultrafine dust was rampant throughout. The concentration of ultrafine dust in Midwestern areas has been constant for 2 days in a row, which is higher than usual. Additional smoke from overseas will flow in overnight, worsening air quality by tomorrow morning. This fine dust is expected to be gradually resolved from tomorrow afternoon. Late tonight, there will be less than 1 centimeter of snow in Gangwon-do province. There will also be a small amount of snow in the eastern parts of Gyeonggi-do province. However, it shouldn't be that cold tomorrow. Tomorrow morning in Seoul will start off at -3, Chuncheon -4 degrees. Daytime temperatures will be relatively mild, 4 degrees in Seoul, 9 degrees in Gwangju and Daegu. On Sunday afternoon, there will be rain or snow in Midwestern areas and Jeollado provinces. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's mine? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Straight through my heart.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
the president also remains committed to boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of this latest.
To discuss the current security environment.
The United Nations most powerful body on global security, expressing hope stock markets around the world have taken a hit amid speculation that the US Federal Reserve Arirang.
Hello everyone, it's Thursday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Key interest rates are frozen for the 8th straight session here in South Korea. The rate pause has been extended yet again as the Bank of Korea kept its policy rate unchanged at 3.5%. The BOK has a lot to consider before pivoting, the still existing inflationary pressure and rising household debt. However, considering the economic slump and rising woes over project financing developments, many are forecasting South Korea to start cutting rates within this year after the Fed does. What are experts' views on this? For this, we have invited Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, welcome.
Happy to be here.
And we also have Professor Shim Myung-gyu from Yonsei University. Good to have you with us, Professor Shim.
Thank you for having me.
All right, first question to our Professor Yang. The very first rate-setting meeting for this year took place, and the BOK decided to keep its benchmark rate at 3.5%. We are going to talk about each factor one by one, but before we do that, could you briefly tell us the reasons behind such a decision?
Okay, well, the Bank of Korea right now is in a very difficult position. It cannot raise the rates or lower the rates without repercussions, and because one of the biggest factor that they have to consider is what will the U.S. Fed do. And right now, the U.S. Fed, it doesn't seem like it's going to change its rates in the near future. So basically, because they could not raise it or lower it, they punt it for the future. Now, some of the reasons that they should raise rates include what you said earlier, the inflation. There's rising household debt, but there's also rising corporate debt. And we want to try to bring the size of that down. But if you raise the interest rate to do that, then that means more burden on households and corporations. So that means probably less consumption and less investment. And then the interest rate reversal, the U.S. rate right now is at 5.5%, the policy rate. It's higher than Korea's, even though they're safer investment market. So right now, the problem is not serious, but whenever the interest rate reversal exists and it's large, then there's higher possibility that there will be a rapid capital outflow or even a currency crisis. So we don't want to worsen the rate reversal gap, but if we lower the rates, then we do increase that gap, and then there might be more problems with the inflation, with the increasing debt. But given the current GDP slowdown, there are also good reasons to lower the interest rate. So Bank of Korea is caught in the middle.
Right, BOK really must be in dilemma right now. Now, Professor Shim, let's tap on factors one by one. First of all, is inflation. In December, consumer prices rose 3.2% from a year earlier, showing a slowdown for the second month in a row, though prices have stayed above the 3% level for 5 consecutive months. How did you see the figure?
Yeah, as you pointed out, the inflation rate seems to have become stabilized to be between 3% and 4%, particularly after November. So particularly after November, the inflation rate has become lower to at least 3%, which is quite low compared to the average inflation rate during the past 2 years. However, I think it is premature to conclude that the fight over the inflation rate is over for the following 2 reasons. First, the inflation rate is still higher than the target inflation rate of the BOK, which is 2%. Second, the inflation rate spiked up between August and October after being lowered to mid-2% during the middle of 2023. In this sense, we need to look at the core inflation rate, which measures the price level excluding food and energy prices. This still gives us the kind of a negative sign on the inflation rate. It has been stable at around 3% since last July, which is still higher than that was during the period before 2021, implying that there is still a threat on the inflation rate. Or maybe the trend inflation rate has become higher, say to 3% or so that as some recent studies argue. So I think we still need some more time to conclude whether the inflation rate can become lower further to say mid 2% or just keep the same level.
All right, I see. So it would be premature for us to say the fight against inflation is over. Not yet. Now, Professor Yang, I'd like to stay on this inflation front. Seoul Metropolitan Government said that it is planning to increase the subway fare by 150 Korean won, which is just around 10 cents, as early as July this year. Is this plan in any way expected to, delay reaching the inflation target level?
Well, it will have an effect, but it'll be a very tiny effect, so it probably won't affect the major trends. Now, if you look at the main causes for inflation over the last 2 years, the first cause is production and supply shortages coming from the pandemic, the bottlenecks. And then the second is the Russian invasion into the Ukraine, which raised food and energy shortages and caused price increases. And then third, abnormal weather both inside Korea and globally, which increased food shortages during limited periods of time and raised prices on foodstuff. Now, factors 1 and 2, the pandemic-related factors and the invasion-related factors are definitely falling. So that is causing, it's still a high level of inflation, but the level of inflation is currently falling for most countries. So that is the major trend. But because Korea did not raise the subway prices or electricity prices in the past, we are now finally trying to catch up with the level that we should have. But if you look at the subway prices, how does it affect the consumer price index? Well, consumer price index is a weighted average of everything that a typical consumer consumes, and the percentage of the Metropolitan Railroad, including subways, which form that part of the calculation, is only 0.22 to 0.28%. It's less than even 1%. So 10-cent increase on that is not going to probably affect the consumer price index very much. As a comparison, electricity forms 1.6% of the CPI, and gasoline is about 2.4% of the CPI. So that explains why gasoline prices have a much larger impact, but because the subway prices form such a small part, and the large trends in the economy is for falling inflation rate, it's probably not going to have that much of an effect.
All right, good to hear. Now, Professor Shib, another reason why BOK maintained its restrictive policy is because of the bank's rising household loans, which rose for the 8th straight month in November. Could you tell us more about this first?
Yeah, what I and maybe also the other experts worry about is that if the interest rate becomes lower, it may trigger again the hike of the assets like housing or stocks, causing households to accumulate more debt to invest in such assets to get some capital gains. In this sense, I think the Bank of Korea should be careful not to give a wrong sign on the households that the interest rate will become lower very soon. Let me further discuss why household debt is really a problem in Korea. As was emphasized by a report published by the IMF last year, DSR level in Korea was the second highest among the countries that reported DSR in 2022, and thus further accumulation of household debt can be dangerous given that corporate debt is also the problem. The financial crisis between 2007 and 2009 gave us the lesson on the risk of accumulating household debt. Among all the recessions after the World War II, the financial crisis was the episode with the largest decline in operating activity together with slow employment recovery compared to the other recessions. And the risk that Korea faces at this point might be much higher than before because the household debt can trigger a severe recession if it is associated with lower housing price, as we might expect. Then financial constrained households will lower their consumption, as Professor Yang pointed out, resulting in a further decline in GDP. Since the interest rate is still high, the impact can be larger since more households will be borrowing constraints, so that the impact of the, say, the bank run or the others will be much greater.
All right, I see, Professor Shim. Thank you for your explanation. Now, Professor Yang, since South Korea's monetary policies is very much affected by, the Fed's decision, I'd like to ask you this question. Even if the Fed decides to pivot, some say that it would be difficult for BOK to follow suit because of this size of the rate gap between Washington and Seoul. What's your view on this?
Okay, well, the problem is that right now the Korean interest rate is 3.5%. And the U.S. rate is policy rate is 5.5%. So even if the U.S. decides to start to drop the interest rate, now they have given signals that their review of so-called neutral rate of interest, that is the interest rate that you have during normal times, has risen, and they're going to keep the long-term interest rate at 2.5%. Now that means that either unless Korea wants to maintain the interest rate reversal for years, they will Korea will only be able to lower the rates by perhaps 0.5 to 1 percentage point if they want to have Korean rates being higher than the U.S. rates, or if Korea does decide to lower the rates with the United States percentage by percentage, then it will have to lower the interest rate and then raise it sometime in the future while U.S. maintains their rates. So Bank of Korea may be reluctant to lower the rates at the same pace as the U.S. Fed, but the chances are, because the Korean economy is undergoing such a big slowdown right now, if the U.S. does start to lower their rates, then Korea will probably follow as much as possible. But you also have to remember, we don't quite know when the U.S. will pivot. They said that they will pivot sometime this year.
Right.
They did not give any signals on exactly when. Other Fed members other than Chairman Powell have implied that they may not lower the interest rate at all. And the market is assuming that even though the Fed's dot chart has only shown 3 rate cuts this year, some of the market analysts are counting on 6 and starting at the first half of the year. So market may be over-expecting lower interest rate much faster than what the Fed has in mind.
All right, I see your point. Now, Professor Shim, now let's move on to the reasons why we need to consider cutting rates here. Our Professor Yang already told us, but it's first because of growth. The global economy is on course to record its worst half-decade of growth in 30 years, with the World Bank saying this year's is to dip to 2.4%. Now, South Korea is seeing slow recovery, but it cannot be sure about its exact rate of growth. Now, could you tell us more about this?
Yes, as you pointed out, forecasts on the growth rate in 2024 are somewhat gloomy. Not just the World Bank, but UN also recently cut down its forecast on the growth rate of the global economy from 2.5% reported last May to 2.4%. Several think tanks in Korea also predicted that 2024 will be a recessionary episode for the world economy. These pessimistic views are mainly due to the long-lasting high geographical risks, including the wars like Ukraine-Russian war and Israel-Hamas war, high interest rate, high inflation rate, and potential threats on the free trade, depending on the results from the U.S. election. And importantly, the expectations on China are also negative. The World Bank lowered its prediction on the growth rate of China from 5 to 2%, estimated last year to 4.5%, which seems to be really a huge decline. All this downside risk can potentially slow down the growth rate of the Korean economy than expected because our economy heavily depends on the international trade. In 2022, the dependence of GDP on export and import was greater than 100%, which is really high. And this figure implies that the worldwide recession will lower the demand for the goods that Korea can export, and thus it may have much larger impacts on the Korean economy than we have expected. So one might argue that the interest rate cut has to become more prompt than we have expected so that the Korean economy can prepare for the recession in advance. But given then the threats from the inflation rate and worries over the asset price bubbles, and also the interest rate gap between Korea and the US has become wide to like 2%, I think it is still premature to say that the BOK needs to cut the interest rate at this point. I think it needs to wait more until it pivots because it is widely known in the profession that the cost of high inflation rate is much larger than the cost of having lower growth rate.
All right, I see your point. We need to wait. Now, Professor Yang, we cannot leave out concerns over this cash-strapped Taeyong ENC. Creditors of this Taeyong ENC is soon to decide whether to allow this builder to go forward with a debt restructuring program. For those who might not be familiar with this event, could you briefly tell us what this is?
Okay, well, the project financing market is the market that construction companies use to try to finance their construction projects at the beginning. Before they actually start construction, buying land and so on, and at the beginning stages of construction. Now, this market has been shaky for more than a year now, but if you want to look at the cause, you really have to go back to perhaps about 2008, right after the global financial crisis, when not only Korea but other advanced markets lowered their interest rates to perhaps historically low levels. What they did by that is increased the desirability of housing units. They did that by reducing the cost of the interest that they have to pay for loans. So a lot of people borrowed money to buy housing, and that increased the housing market. Some people say that that caused housing bubble prices as well. But this worsened during the pandemic because interest rate fell even further. A lot of companies perhaps overextended themselves by starting new construction projects and borrowing money from the project financing markets. And when the interest rate just started to go back up, and very quickly, a lot of these companies found because of the high inflation, the cost of building was going up, while the cost of borrowing money was going up as well. So they were squeezed, and they found formerly profitable projects becoming unprofitable, and then they had a problem with whether the government, regional government, will guarantee construction construction bonds for Legoland last year, and that sort of frightened the whole market, raised the market interest rate even further. So Taeyong ENC was one of the companies which were caught in that squeeze, but it was always expected to be one of the weakest players because they had such a high debt to capital ratio. So they had a debt to capital ratio of, I believe, 478%. It was also one of the larger construction companies, the 35th largest construction company. So the concern is that, is this the first domino that can lead to not only decline of this company, but decline of other vulnerable companies as well. But luckily, during before the weekend, there were some doubts on whether the workout process can be successful, because Korean workout process insists that the owner families put in their own capital, put in their own wealth to rescue the company. This is contrary to what we normally think of as stock companies, limited liability companies that usually form most of these corporations. This reflects, I think, some of the cultural, economic peculiarities of Korea's chaebol system. But over the weekend, the owner families did say that they will put in a lot more of their wealth, including some of the SBS broadcasting shares that they own as a collateral. So right now, the workout seems to be a bit more optimistic. If the workout can be worked out, then we may prevent the domino effect from taking place, and we may squeak by this particular crisis. But a lot of it does depend on that vote that takes place on whether they will accept this workout, and it also depends on whether other companies will start falling down as well.
All right, I see your point. Now, Professor Shim, we are running out of time, but I'd like to ask you briefly about Fed's future decisions. Some 216,000 jobs were added in the U.S. last month, defying fears of a downturn even after the Fed launched its aggressive campaign. Now, how does such resilience affect the Fed's decision to pivot? And the December's U.S. Consumer Price Index will be released soon, right? How do you expect the figure to be?
I think such a positive sign on the labor market, which we have observed for the last 1 or 2 years, give more time for the Fed to wait until the inflation rate becomes lower to about 2%, which is its target rate. First of all, this is a sign that the U.S. economy can still endure the potential hike in the rate or can keep this current level for a longer period than the market expects. And if we look at the consumption expenditure, it also shows us a kind of the positive sign. The growth rate from a year ago was about 3% in the third quarter of 2023, which is the second highest level since 2022. As a result, the aggregate activity in the U.S. seems to give more room for the Fed not to pivot soon. And given that the most recent inflation rate was 3.1%, which is still higher than the target of the Fed, I guess. And also, I expect that the inflation rate will not vary that much from 3.1%, given that the core inflation rate of the U.S. has not changed that much. And the Fed will still wait until it receives more signs on the inflation rate that it will decline very soon. So I think it will keep the same policy, wait-and-see policy, until it receives more signals to make a pivot.
All right, I see your point. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Shim and Professor Yang, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.